Hello, everyone, and welcome aboard episode number 2 of the Growth Motivator podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Lisa L. Campbell. I am so overjoyed by the overwhelming response to my first episode. Now, I have to be honest and tell you that my podcast has been in a holding pattern for years. Now, you may be wondering, what do I mean by that? Well, 4 years ago, I asked my graphic designer, TS of TS Design Studio, here in the Chicagoland area, to create my cover art for my podcast. Because, all the experts say when you have a podcast, you need cover art. And honestly, the cover art that's on my podcast today is not even the design that he created. It's the one that I created. Simple and to the point. Now, I never lost sight of my dream of wanting to have a podcast because I knew that I had a story to tell. I knew that there were individuals that needed help and needed to hear the story, but my podcast was in a holding pattern because I wanted it to be perfect. I wanted it to be like all of the other podcasts that I had listened to. Every podcast that I listened to had an opening. They call it an intro. And they had a closing. They called it an outro. So I got so caught up in the particulars about how my podcast was going to be set up that I lost sight of the fact that the message that I was going to deliver was really all that I needed to have. In fact, one of my very, very close friends said, I like the podcast, the first episode, but it was kind of sad and it's not your normal bubbly self. But I said, well, everybody that knows me, that listened to the podcast, honestly, the podcast wasn't for you. The podcast is actually for individuals that don't know me, that are crying on the inside because you have a desire to grow. And you too have been in a holding pattern because you have been operating with a fixed mindset. You've been around other individuals that have prevented you from growing, and that stops today. Now, you may be wondering, how is that going to stop today? Well, number one, while you're listening to this podcast, you're going to take out some pen and paper because I'm going to give you some homework to do. Yes, I said homework because in addition to being in healthcare for the last 31 years, I've worked as an adjunct instructor at the university level for 25 years. And so let's just say I'm pretty good at handing out some homework, and we're going to follow up with you on how you did on that homework. So you heard me mention the term mindset and the concept of a fixed mindset. So mindset is really about your belief, your assumption, your expectation. It's really about how you see yourself and how you believe others see you as well. And sometimes it's about how you unconsciously respond on a daily basis. Now, before you ask, am I a mindset expert? No, but I do a lot of reading because I believe that in order to grow, you have to continuously learn. Now, you may be thinking, with all of those degrees, you're still learning? Yes, because it's not about the degrees. Most of the things that I learned, that I know today, that I've learned today, was not in a college textbook. It was the life experiences, but it was also in books that I've read along the way. Like, Who Has Moved My Cheese, right? I've read books on emotional intelligence. I've read books on growth mindset. Recently, I read a book called Change Your Questions, Change Your Life. And that book was so amazing that I find myself saying, wow, where has this book been the last 10 years? And you may be wondering, what was so great about that book? Well, I'll give you the Cliff Notes version. That book talks about how we operate in personal and professional settings where we are choosing moment by moment to be a learner or a judger. A learner or a judger. A learner mindset or a judger mindset. Now, you may be thinking, big deal. But honestly, as I listen to the book on Audible, the points that were made in the book were so earth shattering because it helped me understand why some people have not grown the way that they could, because they're always reacting and always judging and always blaming others as opposed to learning. And so when I think about myself, I'm definitely a lifelong learner. And when I think about this podcast, let's get back to this podcast for a moment. So the other thing that really made me say, all right, let's get going, is that I inboxed one of my professional colleagues, Brian, who has a podcast, and I said, all right, I need to launch this podcast. And he said, well, maybe we should get you on my podcast. And I thought, wait a minute. I have all of the equipment to launch, produce, and execute my podcast. And the only thing that was stopping me was me. Does that sound familiar? That the only reason that you are in a holding pattern is you. Now, I don't know if it was the pandemic or if it was me on this journey to 50, but I realized that it was time for me to shed the weight, the WEIGHT, And I'm not talking about body mass index. I'm talking about the mental weight that was stopping me from doing the things that I know that I am capable of doing, that are part of my destiny. What you have to realize is that number one, outside of the fact that you haven't started to do the things that you are destined to do, part of the reason that you haven't accomplished your goals is that you haven't surrounded yourself with individuals or an individual that can help you meet your goal. So write this down. Point number one. If you want to invest in real estate, you need to surround yourself with individuals that have successfully navigated that space. Now, I'm not telling you something that I've read about. I'm telling you something that I know for a fact. And I'm going to use myself as an example. I've spent many years, blood, sweat, and tears on an entrepreneurial journey. And I've spent countless nights trying to explain the struggles that I go through to individuals that are not entrepreneurs. Now, they're empathetic to my situation, but guess what? They don't truly understand what I'm going through. And they will oftentimes make comments about, oh, you're still at the office? Well, one of the things I had to realize is that when you have a 9 to 5 mindset, and no shade against a 9 to 5 mindset, but when you have a 9 to 5 mindset, you don't understand the grind that is associated with going after something that is for you. Because when you're busy working hard for someone else, you're making their dreams come true, not yours. So, point number one, surround yourself with individuals that have successfully navigated the space that you want to be in. Now, the ones that have successfully navigated it, trust me, they've had some failures. As an entrepreneur, have I gotten it right all the time? Absolutely not. But I am authentic enough to be able to share the things that I've done wrong. But the reason that you need to surround yourself with individuals that have navigated the journey is because they can give you some words of wisdom. Now, be clear on the fact that some people aren't willing to share. Okay. That's number one. Number two, on the journey to meeting your goals, you have to ensure that you understand that it's not about being a perfect self, but it's about being a better version of you. I think there are some people in my life who think that I try to be perfect. And I don't know if it's insecurities in them. I know I'm not perfect. I know that I have flaws. But you need to identify in advance how you're going to deal with the stuff that's going to happen when you're not yet getting the goal that you are setting out to achieve. Every week, I sit down and write down the things that I need to accomplish the next week. Do I accomplish them all? No, I don't, because I'm not perfect. But do I write them down? Yes, because I need to have a roadmap for what is ahead of me the next week. Because if not, I'm going to be all over the place. So again, strive for a better self, not a perfect self. That's point number 2. The best way to take on challenges is to change. Self improvement comes from self acceptance. Self improvement comes from self acceptance. Is the journey going to be easy? Absolutely not. But you must also realize, and this is point number 3, and I'm going to close for today. This is not a journey that you have to do alone. Everyone needs coaching. The moment that my life started to shift was when I got a coach, when I joined a mastermind group. And I didn't realize the impact that it would have on my life. Because number 1, I finally got in a circle around my people, around individuals that were doing the same things that I was doing or had already done them, was experiencing the same struggles that I was experiencing. But the coach was able to give me the tools that I needed to be successful. Is it a perfect science? No. So my third thing is you need to get a coach. And coaching is not like therapy, right? So coaching is an individual that will help you meet your goals, will work with you to help you meet your goals. Now, ultimately, you're in the driver's seat. This person is the learner in your journey. They're not there to judge you. So recently, I've been coaching a few individuals, and it's been so exciting, rewarding to watch them take, as they've said in their own words, take their mess and turn it into a strategy that they can use to get to the next level and the next level. And every time we get together for our coaching sessions, they walk away with more clarity. So if you are ready to take your growth to the next level, let's do it. I'm Dr. Lisa L. Campbell, and we've just wrapped up episode number 2 of the Growth Motivator. But let's recap. What are the 3 points for today? Surround yourself with individuals that have experienced what you are trying to do, right? We are also not going to be a perfect self. We're going to be a better self. And then number 3, you are not to go at this alone. I was alone for a long time. I spent a lot of time crying in the bathtub, crying in the car weekly. And once I found my tribe, once I got my coach, the crying decreased. Now, I thought you probably were thinking, oh, did the crying go away? No, the crying didn't go away, but my cries were different cries because my cries were cries of victory. My cries were cries where, wow, I have processes in place. I have things in place that I didn't have before. And now I have a community to help support me in my journey. Because I've been through situations where I failed during my entrepreneurial journey and failed miserably. And some of the people that are the closest to me, they don't realize it, but they rubbed my failure in my face to the extent where I felt like a dagger was being repeatedly, over and over again, placed in my chest and turned and turned and turned and turned. And so the other thing that you need to understand, not everyone understands your vision. Not everyone needs to go on your journey because sometimes growth means that you have to also outgrow some people. Thank you so much for listening.